Hi guys, my name is Alyssa and this is my practicum presentation, which is all about providing my students with structured opportunities to speak in class. Okay, so first to give you an overview of my practicum placement, my practicum took place at Alhambra High School in Phoenix, Arizona, and this is where I currently teach as an ESL teacher. Alhambra is a Title I school, and we have about 2,500 students on campus this year, so it is a big school. The community around Alhambra is changing significantly. Grand Canyon University is less than half a mile away from the high school, and a lot of the low-income housing around the school campus is being bought out by the university to convert into more university buildings. But at the same time, the university is sending a lot of their aspiring teachers onto the high school campus to tutor students and observe classrooms, which I think is really great, both for our students and for the college students. A lot of refugees are resettled in the area, so we have a high refugee population, and in addition, the caravans from Central and South America have really increased our ELL population as well. We have one of the largest ELL populations in the state of Arizona, and we do have the largest ELL population at the high school level in Arizona. There are over 500 English language learners on campus, which makes up about 18% of the total school population. So almost 1 in every 5 students on campus is an English language learner. In Arizona, they handle ESL education a little bit differently, so I wanted to just explain the levels really quickly. ESL students in Arizona are in 4 hours of English every day. These are structured immersion classes, and their placement is determined by an annual proficiency assessment called the ELLs. On ELLs, there are 4 levels, which you can see here. Pre-emergent, basic, intermediate, and proficient. Pre-emergent is the foundational level, which is what I teach. All of the courses I teach are at this level. An interesting fact from one of my class surveys that I did at the beginning of the year is that 86% of all of my students have lived in the United States for 1 year or less. Most of them have only lived here since the beginning of the school year in August. There is a lot of room for growth at this level. Last year, 78% of the students at the pre-emergent level moved up at least 1 level, which is definitely something to celebrate. So now on to my students, which is my favorite part of the whole job. Like I said, I teach at the pre-emergent level. Out of the 6 classes I teach, 4 are the same course, which is called Conversational English and Academic Vocabulary, or CEAV for short. In total, I have 82 students in these courses, which is about 20 in each class. Some have more, some have less. I have 42 boys and 40 girls overall. Overall, it's pretty evenly split, but there are some classes where I have way more boys or way more girls. The ability levels of my students vary significantly. Even though they're all in the pre-emergent level, there isn't one definition of that. They all fit that definition very differently. Usually, my students have significant gaps in their education, whether it be that they were living in a refugee camp or education wasn't available where they grew up. Most students, though, can read and write in their native language, but still not at their grade level. Some students are proficient in multiple languages, just not English, and several students aren't literate in any language. And I'll have students at each one of these levels in every class. My students are incredibly diverse. Here's a list of their first languages. I think I got them all on here. Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, French, and Kinyarwanda are the largest, but there are also these smaller languages, Malay, Karenni, Mam, and a lot of other African dialects too. Even though the majority of students speak Spanish, they're from all over Central and South America, so one culture isn't necessarily dominating over another. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my practicum focus was about speaking. The standards and categories that I assess in CEAV are listening, speaking, and academic vocabulary. I feel really comfortable teaching listening skills and teaching academic vocabulary, but to be honest, speaking is scary to me. I don't really know why, but it's really hard for me to implement speaking activities that I feel are great and effective in my classes. So my main goal was to learn what helps my students feel confident and prepared to speak with their peers, especially about these academic themes that we learn in CEAV. Aside from knowing that speaking is definitely an area of improvement in my instruction, several resources throughout the program discuss the need for speaking in oral development. The first is in Teaching Reading to English Language Learners. They say that providing ELL students with authentic and purposeful activities for engaging in discourse with their peers is key to promoting oracy skills. This is what I really wanted to focus on. My students can have conversations with me and I can engage with them about what I want them to talk about, but even more powerful is the ability for them to communicate with their peers in the classroom. In addition, the authors discuss the importance of oral language in general, especially for new English learners, because all languages have oral communication, but not all languages have written communication. So by communicating orally with other people, it can help students make sense of complex ideas, which they can then read about or write about and help develop the other domains of English. The SciOp book was also very helpful when I was looking to find a focus for practicum. They call these conversations with peers instructional conversations, and I really like that term. They say that they provide a context for learning in which language is expressed naturally through meaningful discussion. My plan for practicum was to research 4 different speaking strategies to use in my classes, and I was going to pick one per week and implement it twice. So I picked Tuesday and Thursday every week to be my designated speaking activity days. Here are the 4 strategies that I chose. Think, Pair, Share is one that I use all the time, and my students are super familiar with it, but the other 3 I've never used before, and so it required me to first teach the strategy and then implement it. So I'm glad I picked 2 days to do that because they definitely needed to become familiar with the strategy before I felt like it could be effective. There were a lot of bumps along the road, but in the end, my students did speak more than they ever have so far this year, and I also learned ways that I can support them in the future. My biggest finding in using these strategies is that one size doesn't fit all. In other words, even if the strategy says that it's a great strategy for ELL students, it's going to need to be modified to fit the specific needs that students have. Differentiation is crucial, especially for English language learners. Like I said, an ESL strategy on its own probably isn't going to be sufficient for them to understand the content. Like I said, I had to teach the expectations and the rules of the strategy. Students need to be familiar with something before they use it. You need to evaluate how effective it is and how it went, and then adjust it along the way. Strategies need to be planned with specific students in mind. So this is the question that I constantly asked myself towards the end of practicum. Once I realized that I need to change the strategy, I asked myself, what additional support does this student need in order to meet this objective that I want them to? Here's an example from my practicum. This is from the second strategy that I chose, which is called question strips. The idea is that each student selects a question and walks around the room to find a partner. They ask each other the question and respond to each other's question. This was actually really fun to implement. I played music, kind of like musical chairs, and when it stopped, they had to buddy up. But that was about the end of the greatness because I didn't anticipate what they needed, and it wasn't successful. The students were confused and frustrated. I was also. They became disengaged, and it was really just a struggle to get through that day. I had to reflect and plan a ton before I did it again that Thursday. Which leads me to my recommendation. Students need to be met where they are. So teachers are going to have to plan multiple ways for students to complete or accomplish the same task or objective. How do you do that? Like I said, I asked myself this question: what additional support would this student need in order to meet the objective? This is where knowing your students is essential, which comes from feedback, observations, assessments that are ongoing. This is definitely something I can improve on as well, but when I do it consistently, I do feel like I truly understand what my students need. For a specific implementation, I use the SIOP textbook again. They explain the importance of differentiation. They provide really specific and practical ideas that are relevant in multiple different scenarios, so I feel like I can go to them all the time. And I created this graphic because I'm a visual learner, and this is what it looks like in my head. So student 1, 2, and 3 need varying levels of support in order to accomplish the same task. As you can see, student number 3 is going to need much more support and modifications than student number 1 needs. In the future, one of the strategies that the SIOP textbook uses and mentions is sentence frames, and this completely changed my question strip strategy when I did it again on Thursday. So they offer examples of differentiated sentence frames based on students' ability. I used their examples to create my own sentence frames that I gave to students that helped the strategy go much better. Sentence frames give every single student the opportunity to respond. And what I really liked about using the sentence frames is that students were able to create these responses that they probably wouldn't have been able to do on their own, and I was able to engage in a discussion with them and develop the conversation further. So here's an example of the sentence frames that I used. The first one has options for the student to choose as their answer. The second one, students pick their own response. Then they provide their own reason, and then it becomes a more complex sentence that my highest ability students were able to do. So even though sentence frames are a great modification and can be helpful in any ELL classroom, they have to be created with specific students in mind. So to make it the most effective, individual teachers have to create them based on data and observation and assessment and feedback. And students can move between each sentence frame at different times. So if a student needed to start on the second sentence frame that I created, well, maybe the next week they would be able to use the last one, the most complex one, and vice versa. So my question then became, how can I help my students participate in discussions so that they can learn what they need to be successful in the mainstream classroom? Because after all, our goal is to provide them with enough language that they can then go be successful in their regular classes and graduate and go on to find great jobs and go to school. Here are my references. I'm looking forward to reading your feedback, and I'll definitely take any suggestions you have to offer. Thank you.